Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Austin right here in Bonnie Lake, outside Tacoma. I'm with my buddy Alan, who is a financial planner, wealth manager, all good things involving money. And the question that I think we're going to dive in today is, are you better? Are you in a better place today than you were a year ago? And I see that a lot of people aren't. In fact, there was a Gallup poll that recently just came out, and people right out came out and said about 48% of people are saying their finances are just straight up deteriorating. And I think that's pretty sad, first of all. And 32% of those people, that were polled overall, said that inflation is the biggest thing. So, Alan, should we jump in on that? Kind of what's been going on with the inflation thing? I mean, we're at a 40-year high for inflation, right? I mean, something obviously my lifetime never seen, and you're not 40 yet, so you've not been there either. So, like, what really is the driving force behind it? On the back end, more than what we might hear on like a Fox News or CNN.
Yeah, and thanks for having me, Austin. Appreciate being here. I think inflation is definitely the headline. But to kind of get to the heart of your question, there is no one thing that's driving inflation at a time like this. And we kind of rewind the clock at least a little bit when we think back to March of 2020, a couple of years ago, when the pandemic really started affecting the economy, not just the U.S. economy, the world economy. Hitting the brakes on massive economic growth is going to have some lingering effects. And we're seeing that right now with inflation, supply chain shortages, labor market pains, all of that kind of got baked into this pandemic economic recovery that we were hoping to see in 2021. We started to see it, and that was good. But now we're starting to see the effects of that growth in 2022. And it's kind of this double-edged sword. The supply chain, that's causing some inflationary pressures, and then interest rates. Interest rates are starting to go up, and it's because the Fed is trying to tackle inflation, but it's kind of feeding into the system. So it all trickles down to, everything around us when we go to the supermarket and see prices are up, but also it affects the stock market, it affects the real estate market. So it's definitely not one thing, but it's across the board affecting everybody.
Yeah, we see, like, I know locally. So on the real estate side, I look at certain areas, I'm just kind of shocked. Like, you look at places like Renton, for example. In the Seattle area, Renton is a little south. It's not probably the nicest place there is. It's not the worst either, but that market year over year is like 32%. And then, of course, in the higher end, you have Bellevue, which is like 25%.
Yeah.
And these prices and the lower demand is causing a housing crisis. And we're seeing that across the board, I think, with our supply chains and manufacturing and everything else. So before we really kind of get into what that all means, what's the hope? Like, how do you come out of the multiple crises? I think that's the question a lot of people are looking for, is just, here's where we're at. This really sucks. And I'm just getting this ultra left-wing view or this ultra right-wing view about how it goes. Well, what does the normal guy say?
Well, I'm going to give you this answer. And before this is over, I'm going to start to sound like a broken record, I'm sure. And my clients already know that I sound like a broken record. To answer your question, it depends. And what I mean by that is we don't know what's going to happen. There is no crystal ball. So I just want to get that out there. I have no clue exactly how everything's going to play out. But, I do have faith in the U.S. economy and the U.S. stock market, and the real estate market is going to recover at some point. Things are going to get back on track. But, we're in this, what I call kind of the growing pains of this interest rate increase that we're going through. And the Fed's already communicated they're going to increase rates a few more times this year. What I'm seeing, and, I'll defer to you into the nitty gritty of how the real estate market's working right now. But what I'm seeing is that there were people that were maybe on the fence about selling, and they knew that if they sold their home, they could go buy another home and get, a pretty low interest rate mortgage. Well, now the interest rates have gone up and mortgage rates have gone up. The people that were on the fence about selling, they're like, no, I can't sell, because then I can't go get a low interest rate mortgage, which has made the supply problem even worse. Right. So less people want to sell their homes because they know that the mortgage rates are high. So, this idea of price appreciation might be unsustainable in the 20+% range. I think we can all agree that is a little crazy. what the Fed is hoping, let's put on our Mr. Optimistic hat here. The Federal Reserve is hoping that they kind of just feather the brakes a little bit on price appreciation, that we get back to, something that is sustainable, whatever that number is, who knows? And the volatility that we're seeing in the stock market, the real estate market, everywhere right now, that's the headline for 2022. Volatility is not going anywhere. Once these interest rate hikes are done by the Fed, well, then maybe we do kind of figure things out, and yeah, maybe we did feather the brakes, we get back to normal. Worst case scenario is we slam on the brakes, and I don't foresee that happening, but like I said, I don't have the crystal ball. It's a lot of wait and see. And the stock market, every market hates uncertainty. And when we don't know what's around the corner, that just makes the markets do these bigger ups and bigger downs.
So yeah, everything's driven on greed, fear, and uncertainty. That's pretty much
right.
It. So I think one of the things too, I think a lot of people, they look at the scenario and they want prices to drop really quick, right? They want that relief. But isn't it true that if you were to decrease those prices quickly, that's what kind of pushes you more towards that recession areas when you don't let that thing take its course like the Fed's wanting to. I will say I do see a shift in the housing market. I don't see something where we're just like stalling out or good things aren't happening. But what we are seeing, Alan, here locally is I'm starting to see the new listings starting to be coming in line with pendings. Like today, for the last 7 days, there were only 300 difference. So that means our inventory is increasing. So just like you were saying, you're going to start seeing more of an increase. I haven't gotten to see that slowing of prices yet. But like the stock market, I'm actually a huge fan of a balanced market. Like it's great. It's great to we're all going to make $1 million on the houses that we sell. But when it's balanced, you can do a lot more volume in a lot healthier way. And you're dead right. Like, people were getting 2.5% interest rates. So they were hawking their houses to go for anything. Yeah. But a lot of the sellers also had a ton of equity. So they were moving that. And ultimately, when that shift kind of happened, I felt like your first time home buyers and your younger people, ended up kind of getting pushed out, seeing somewhere between 25 and 30% of buyers just being in that first time buyer range. So actually interesting question, coming from the real estate broker to you, do you think it's a good time for a millennial, just throwing that out there because it's our age group. Do you think right now is a good time for a millennial to buy a house?
Well, and this is where, I think this is a good conversation for you and I to have, because my advice is to buy a home. And if this is going to be the home that you live in, this is going to be your primary residence. And I'm not talking about your forever home, but this is where you want to live. Like, you need a roof over your head. And doing some real basic math, if you're paying rent and a mortgage would be about the same, why not invest in yourself? Invest in an asset like a home so that you can hopefully get a return in the future, or at least, you're not just wasting your money. But that said, there's some disclaimers I want to put out there. We've got to make sure that you've got a plan in place for emergencies, that emergency fund. You got to make sure you're also taking care of your retirement. So buying a home is one piece of the financial puzzle. But what I would, I definitely lean into, and I see this on social media. I see all these TikTok gurus out there that are saying, hey, real estate, dump all of your money into this, all of this. And like you were pointing to, one extreme or the other, it can be a slippery slope if you're looking at, the next door neighbor or the person on social media that said, look, I made my fortune doing this. They don't get into the nuts and the bolts of what it means to be a homeowner. Right. Make sure that you go into any investment with your eyes wide open. So that's a really long-winded way of saying, if you're looking to buy a home and live in that home for, I'd say at least 5 years, that's my opinion. It makes sense as long as it fits in your budget, and that takes some careful planning. But again, you mentioned earlier, the purchasing power of buying a home is getting harder and harder. So we just need to make sure that, again, careful planning goes into any big purchase.
I got so I'm streaming this live on TikTok on a different device, just on my end, and got a couple questions. Basically, essentially, what's the alternative? Emergency funds, retirement. Are we talking about millennials here? So, Are we seeing at least an uptick of millennials that are starting to kind of move into that shift of preparing?
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, it's just, we're getting to that age of life where retirement isn't this thing way off in the future. It's, maybe the light of the tunnel is getting a little bit brighter, and we're starting to realize the earlier we begin saving for retirement, the more achievable it can be. And yeah, I'm seeing that shift personally, that more and more people, in that millennial generation are checking the boxes, making sure they're putting the right amount in their 401k. They're putting enough money into savings for rainy days, and they're also investing in their day-to-day living, like with real estate. And it's all about creating that checklist so you don't overdo it in any one area. Believe it or not, you could put so much into, let's say you put every penny you have into your 401k, and then you've got nothing in your emergency fund. That's not good either. So, I think balance might be the theme of this conversation, making sure you realize you've got that balance.
Now, so the people that you work with are pretty much what I would consider high net worth individuals, right? That's pretty fair to say.
Correct.
Just curious, and this was actually not in my, not in my initial like planning or anything, but I'm just curious, what percentage of, not besides their main home, what percentage of your investors actually actively invest in real estate?
Well, direct investments in real estate, just to make sure we're on the same page here, we're talking about maybe a rental home, maybe an Airbnb. Yeah. So most of the clients that I work with, it's less than half.
Okay.
I'd say probably in the 25% range. And the reason is most of the people that I work with, they've been around a long time. I work with a lot of people kind of in that millennial time range. And then I also work with the people that are already retired. And people are trying to simplify their lives. But just because they're not actively investing in it now doesn't mean they've set themselves up in the past with real estate proceeds funding their retirement. So it's typically long-term investors that I work with. And for the people that are investing in real estate actively right now in like a rental or maybe a short-term rental, Airbnb, Verbo kind of a thing, that is just another conversation to make sure that they're doing all the right steps with their insurance, with their taxes, with, again, it kind of is this chain reaction of investing in a short-term rental sounds like a good idea, but make sure you look under the hood and you understand what you're getting yourself into.
Well, I kind of feel we won't dive too deep. This is a whole separate conversation, but
totally.
I feel the same way, and I'm sorry, I'm probably gonna like piss off 8 of the 10 platforms I'm on right now, but I kind of feel the same way about like Bitcoin. So I start seeing like more and more stuff that reminds me of like, you remember the tech bubble? It's like pets.com and celebrities were pushing a lot of tech, and now you're seeing like sports figures pushing like FTX and pushing Bitcoin, and it's like, oh, okay, well, this looks unstable. And then I see like Fidelity is allowing you to invest into Bitcoin for your 401k. And I know there's nothing really backing it other than like the scarcity. It's like what, 21 million coins, something like that. And I get that's why we like invest in like gold and silver, because there's scarcity, right?
Sure. Yeah.
To a certain extent. You tell me if I'm wrong, but I've seen more and more people start driving that way. And it makes me feel a little uncomfortable. So I know you can't give specific advice, right, on that, but can you give me like what are your thoughts on that stepping of crypto stepping in, just like real estate versus like traditional investments?
Yeah, no, I think this is a conversation that more people should have, because anytime you're thinking about investing in anything, you should do your due diligence. You should dive into whatever it is that you're thinking about putting your money into, because there is risk involved. And, the risk tolerance aspect of cryptocurrencies in general, Bitcoin, you have to have a really, really high risk tolerance when it comes to these. And I'll put it out there, they're speculative investments. And I'm not saying crypto is going to disappear, or I'm not saying it's the complete future. That's my disclaimer. I have no specific advice or recommendations I'm going to give you today, but I will maybe turn the conversation back to financial planning in general. So, when we think about creating a financial plan, a lot of people instantly think about the numbers, budgeting, where should I invest, those kind of things. And most of my clients, the number one reason people hire me is to make sure that I put their money into the right place so that we get the right portfolio created. But I'd say a close number 2 is the behavioral finance side of investing. And let me tie this into cryptocurrency. right now, when you do some research on any coin, Bitcoin, or really anything token that's out there, it's really easy to fall into this rabbit hole of confirmation bias. Maybe you type into Google, why is Bitcoin a good investment? If you do that, you've already set yourself up for disaster, because you're just going to get a lot of like echo chamber information about why it's a good investment because you type that in. And then you can kind of maybe even trick yourself into saying, all right, well, this is a no-brainer because of all this quote unquote research that you did. So these biases are easy to fall into, but not easy to recognize when it happens to yourself. And that's where, again, I like to be that objective third party for anyone I talk with, is like, let's look at the whole picture, try to see the forest through the trees. And with crypto, you brought up, and just to pivot a little bit, you brought up gold, silver. A lot of people put this into this category as a hedge against inflation or a hedge against crashes. What we've seen in 2022 is when the market went down, the crypto markets also went down. People were trying to preach that, oh no, this is going to go up when the market goes down, and that is not what we're seeing. So, when it comes to risk tolerance, make sure that you understand what your true tolerance is for these market swings.
Okay, so this is going to lead me into probably your bread and butter.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons why I brought up the Bitcoin thing was I had just heard, I had two spinoffs of Bitcoin here. So the first one, so I just heard, Warren Buffett at the Berkshire Hathaway, their big thing, said he would pay what, $25 for all cryptocurrency, right? All of it together.
He's not a fan.
Yeah, not a fan. And the other thing that I heard out of the similar timeline was, Charlie also is pretty much a god of investing.
Yeah.
He has been very speculative, right, of platforms like Robinhood.
Yeah. Oh, he had some colorful things to say about Robinhood.
He did. And, my dad was like, same thing, it's gambling, it's yada, yada. And meanwhile, like, my wife invests in Robinhood, but it's like play money. And hilariously, now a year later, after me being like, you old dude, like, get with the times, Robinhood's portfolio is like down, like, stock's down like 86%. Like, it's brutal. So, especially this age group being somewhere between probably 20 and 50 that are on here. Yeah. While that's fun and all, like, how should people be investing?
Well, let me give you one of my favorite Charlie Munger quotes. It's not supposed to be easy. Anyone who finds it easy is stupid. Charlie is famous for really kind of poo-pooing the idea that you can just get lucky in investing. It takes a lot of hard work. And what those investing apps and different platforms did is they figured out a way to gamify stock market investing, and in some respects, cryptocurrency investing too. And, the risks that go into buying a single stock, buying a single company, those risks are high, and they kind of swept that under the rug in some respects. And that's not a healthy way to invest. So, my investment philosophy and the investment philosophy at my firm, Merriman Wealth Management, is build a massively diversified portfolio, participate in market growth, and invest in the long term. In other words, the most boring way to invest over long periods of time. And again, if we're talking about retirement planning, that is going to be your best bet to ensure that you've got a financially stable future. Invest a little bit each paycheck or each month into your retirement accounts. And then over 5, 10, 20, 30 years, you're going to see that growth. The problem with apps and the problem with attention spans these days is people want immediate gratification. And that is not how the stock market was built. And in a lot of respects, that's not how real estate investing was built either.
I mean, think about it. Like, if you look at an app like this is called like Tinder, right? Those dating apps, which are, I think, after you and I were on that market. Like, we literally, I'm not talking like buying a stock at the push of a button. We will disregard a human being with a swipe. Like, to show you where attention span is. That's pretty that's pretty aggressive.
Yeah. And the different financial biases that go into this, that overconfidence, when you do see an investment go up, we're psychologically hardwired to be like, what, I might be a genius. You go from novice to genius in 2 seconds, and that's a slippery slope.
So the next, I think the last spinoff I have from talking about Bitcoin was another thing that I noticed was over the course of the Super Bowl and things like that, I've seen some different ways that crypto was used to like support Ukraine,
Yeah.
which I think is pretty cool. Like it's a little different, right? It's a different way of doing that because it's not bound by anything. And that kind of brought me to my next thought, which was that conflict, I feel like, has been a big thing for America. And the more people I've talked with, like they really, honest to God, don't get why a conflict in the Ukraine that involves Russia and the Ukraine is having such a huge effect on their portfolios here back at home.
Well, this is, I call this the fire drill conversation that I have with all of my clients. When we're talking about long-term planning and investing over 5, 10, 20 plus years, there are going to be stock market corrections and crashes and downturns, and there are going to be caused by what I call black swan events. And a year or two ago, I said, if war breaks out, that would be a black swan event. It's not expected. It's going to catch people off guard. And the reason that it affects the stock market is, again, the stock market hates uncertainty. When it's calm waters and everything's just kind of easy going, that's when we see growth in the market. 2021, I think, is a really good example of that. Is the market just grew all of last year. So obviously, war in Europe, potential conflict with Russia, none of that has positive impacts on the U.S. economy. And this goes back into our conversation at the top about inflation. It does affect supply chains and specifically energy. Talk about feeling pain in our wallets. There's pain at the pump when we go to fill up our cars, unless you're driving an electric car. There's a direct impact. Russia is one of the leading world suppliers of energy, and that affects not just the U.S., but also developed nations in Europe and around the world. And that chain reaction is what we're all kind of on pins and needles to see how this plays out. And, if there's a glimmer of hope that the conflict is going to get reserved or fixed, stock market goes up. All of a sudden, if there's more bad news, stock market goes down. So that's, I'd say, one of the main drivers of volatility this year, on top of all those other reasons we talked about.
So the like conflicts or war, for example, is not as effective. It doesn't affect the long-term investor as much as it does somebody who's maybe playing more of that gambling game, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a really good distinction. So yeah, the people that are on those apps and they're hitting the buy button and they're hitting the sell button, that's where, when you pull back and look at your results, it's probably not going to look that great. And this is, again, everyone has a different investment philosophy. I invest for the long term. And if I have something that I've got on the calendar in a few weeks or months or even a year, I'm keeping that in cash, and that's where that security comes from. That emergency fund gives you two things. Number one, obviously, if there's the unexpected, you can just take care of it. You don't have to touch your portfolio. But also, if you've got a long time until retirement, these kinds of market downturns is something to take advantage of. From an investing standpoint, if we roll back the clock after the 2008, 2009 financial crisis, how many people were buying homes at the bottom? Not a lot, but those that did were very, very happy. And don't get me wrong, hindsight's always going to be 2020, but this is where there are ways and there's strategies that you can do to take advantage of market downturns.
Yeah, that's what I think is a big thing is right now. I think a lot of people are so nervous because they're seeing the news and everything's cranking down. But I remember like when COVID hit, and I bought a ton of stuff. And people thought I was insane. I had bought stocks that refill casinos and traveling and all kinds of stuff. And now, even with the little downturn we've had now, I'm still positive. But you know what? That's not getting touched for like 30 more years anyways. Right. So I think kind of just developing that thought process, whether it's real estate investing, whether it's, investing in the stock market, bond, whatever it is actually having a game plan. And I think that's where I see most people actually fall on their ass, Alan, is like we get excited by everything. I mean, everything is exciting, right? Flash squirrel, here we go. And we don't really have a game plan. You see guys will go out and they'll buy a house in Seattle for $650 and like, I'm going to flip this thing, but it needs $200,000 to work and it's worth $850. They make like $12,000. And by the time they pay their agent, they lost money on it. So in your world, like, where do you start at? Like what give us a game plan, man? Like solve the problem.
Well, you've hit the nail on the head in terms of how I approach all of this. So obviously the best quote around planning, failing to plan is just planning to fail. If you start to go down some path without actually knowing where you're going, you don't know where you're going to end up. It's like going on a cross-country road trip and throwing the map out the window, throwing your phone out the window. Just be like, no, I'll wing it. I'll find it. Yeah, you might get there eventually, or you might crash and burn on the way there. So the way that I approach investing, financial planning, we need to put together all the different puzzle pieces and make sure there's no blind spots in not only your investment portfolio, but your real estate portfolio, how your taxes are being handled. Do you have an estate plan? Like that could be a whole nother conversation. You and I talking about wills, powers of attorney, trust, that kind of a thing. And then just making sure it's all coordinated. Because honestly, I see myself, I'm a financial advisor, I'm a wealth planner, but also I'm in the business of providing peace of mind. There is so much complexity that goes into making sure that you can stop working when you want to stop, that a lot of people, they just don't even think about it because it can stress them out. Mapping out how to get from where you are today to stop working forever and enjoying life, it takes a lot of careful planning. And along the way, we're going to have to come up with a little mini plan on how to buy your current home and then maybe rent out your previous home or something like that. So all these little plans, that is how I provide peace of mind to the people I work with. And it takes a lot of conversations. It takes a little bit of math behind the scenes, but more often than not is just most people don't know what they don't know. And if we can uncover some of those blind spots, that's going to give you that peace of mind so that, if that flipper in your scenario had done the math ahead of time, they might not have done it and they would have been better for it.
Well, I think that's just the thing. But the tools that we give ourselves now make it so much harder. Like why do I go to a financial advisor when I've got, I've got an app on my phone that I can just log into Merrill Lynch and I can buy stocks for my retirement.
Yeah.
I can be in control of all of it. First of all, I don't like being in control of stuff. It's a way too much pain in the butt.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to not have to deal with that stuff. And I think people, and same thing with real estate, like you see people can sell their homes, some house sell by owner. I'll do the 30 hours of paperwork. I'll deal with title company. I'll deal with cool. That is not my style at all. I don't want to do that. Like at least for free. I don't want to do my job and pretend to be a realtor also. Like I'll just pick the one. I'm just going to be the realtor. And the same goes, I think on your end. So, I mean, for people that haven't entered into that kind of a relationship, what are they looking for in a firm? What are they looking for in a, personal advisor? How do you kind of distinguish? I mean, I'm a big fan of finding your tribe. Like I met you and I liked you right away. Right. The same tribe, right. So, in that professional sense of I've got a bunch of money. I need to make sure that I don't fall on my face, but I have to trust someone else to take care of it. What do you say, people?
Yeah. And you're getting at the heart of is delegation. If there's someone out there that wants to delegate the responsibility of selling a home or putting it together a financial plan, that's where you and I step in. But there's also those people out there that know all of this information is online. And if they want to, just like you said, put in the time and the effort, some people enjoy that. What I tell all of my clients, you can Google a financial question for 4 hours and get 17 different answers to your one question. Or you can shoot me an email in 2 minutes and I'll get you the answer that applies to your situation. So it's, I think that rabbit hole that is the internet, it can do more harm than good if you start getting into the more complex questions. And for, the people that do end up hiring me, they're paying the fee for me to manage their financial plans so that they can get time back. They can do what they love doing. They can get back to their job. They can start making money where they find their passions lie. And it just all goes back to delegating. People that want to delegate, they want to find the right person to do it with. To your point, I take a really long time in our interview process to get to know potential clients. And it's so that obviously I get to know all of the ins and outs of their financial world, but so that they can get to know me. And that's, I think something that I love about my job is I'm hopefully kicking off a 20+ year relationship that everyone that I'm working with. And that's unique. I think it's something that not a lot of people realize when they hire a financial planner. I'm going to be with you every step of the way, not until retirement, but way beyond that. And having that confidence you're not just going to like Google somebody and hire them on the spot in my world. And hopefully in yours too, you get to know prospective clients and they get to know you.
Yeah, there's definitely some beauty in like a relationship-based business. I feel very bad people in transactional-based like business. You get to have that like long-term like life connection. It's definitely special. So you're the expert. What is the stock market even doing? Just like give us a quick, this real estate conference we were at, there was a speaker and she said a line that was, no one gives a shit about your market update. And I do think like, the real estate aspect, if you're just telling people like this many homes have been listed and this many homes have been sold, like it doesn't have any real power or, any value. So I guess what I'm saying is, what does the market look like? And how does that affect us as humans on an emotional level, versus just the ones, twos, and threes?
Yeah. Well, the market is digesting a lot of bad news as fast as it can. And when we think about the different, what I call headwinds, the market's running into these headwinds right now. The conflict in Ukraine is the big one. Inflation is a big one. Let's not forget, technically, the pandemic is still affecting the economy in some respects. If you think about the stock market like a spring, right now, all these headwinds are just compressing that spring. Bad news, bad news, bad news. The market goes down. If any of these different headwinds gets resolved faster than expected, again, Mr. Optimistic over here, if all of a sudden the conflict in Ukraine is over like that, that would make the spring, that is the stock market, jump right up. And that's because, again, uncertainty is the market's worst enemy. And if we can get some good news, that's going to really put some wind in our sails and give us that tailwind. But the problem is, and again, getting back to the behavioral finance, the psychology of what's happening right now, is there's this hindsight bias. 2021 was an incredible year for market growth across the board. Everyone's portfolios went up, their real estate values went up. And all of a sudden, us as humans, we think, well, that's the norm. Let's just keep doing that. And the reality is market volatility is going to be here, and it's not the same year as last year. So what we're all on pins and needles is thinking about and trying to figure out what the Fed's going to do. The Fed is trying to take in all this data, and they're trying to make economic decisions from an interest rate perspective. And, the pent-up demand story that we went through with the pandemic, and when I say pent-up demand, we were all cooped up in our house, but we wanted to go spend money at the restaurants. We wanted to go on vacation. We wanted to spend our money, but, because of restrictions, we couldn't to the full extent that we wanted to.
Sure.
In a lot of respects, that good economy is just, it's waiting in the wings. We want to get out there and get this economy restarted. And if again, any of these headwinds get cleared up sooner rather than later, that's going to be a good thing for the market. And that's where the Fed's trying to weigh, well, yeah, the market looks bad now, but it believes that this is a strong economy if the things get sorted out. So we're in that holding pattern in terms of what they're going to do. They said they're going to raise rates, and we're just going to stick with that for now.
I feel like they just keep doing it.
Yeah, right.
I thought there was going to be 3. I think we're like 7 now or something.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, after this first rate hike, and we saw this already happen in the mortgage industry. Again, better than I do, but mortgage rates went up a little bit faster than we thought they would.
Yeah.
So, the big question is, when the Fed raises rates again, how big of an impact is that going to have on mortgage rates? Is it already priced in? Is it already baked into the projections? Obviously, we'll wait and see, but that's one idea.
I got to tell you, then coming from a real estate broker standpoint, I don't stress on the mortgage rates as much as probably some people do. Yeah. People got to buy and got to sell. They got to buy and got to sell. I think for me, it was just a shock to just jump so much so fast.
Yeah.
And then our community, the real estate community, did a really bad job of communicating it.
Yep.
We were basically like, our entire ecosystem of real estate agents, our response was, here's a TikTok about buy, I'll never see you again, 2.5% interest rates, or holy crap, remember when I told you 2 years ago? We did not do a good job.
Right.
I think universally as a collective body in empowering clientele. And I think that and I'm sorry if you're a real estate broker watching this, but it's just the way it is. I think we actually scared the market more than we needed to.
Yeah.
That's our own insecurities, not understanding the way the bond market works, or, wanting to be funny on TikTok, or wanting to say, hey, I told you so. But ultimately, I don't think it was a great move. What I will tell you is I've had a couple of clients that have shopped around. I've got my few lenders that I work with, and they've talked to them, and they might have talked to a couple other lenders. And so people, I don't feel like, are even trying to pull back. I think the housing crisis, unfortunately, is still it's very real. Like, we're still having a ton of stuff going under contract and selling. People are just shopping a little bit more. A year ago, I could be like, here's Susie, she does my mortgages, and they'd be like, okay, and that's who would get the loan, right? The only difference, I think, now in our industry, or in the mortgage industry, is now the mortgage brokers, they're having to work, right? Their refinance pool is gone.
Oh yeah.
Like, no one's refinancing from 3% to 5.6.
Right.
So they're now having to work. They're now having to get back out the real estate agents. They're now having to compete with rates, things like that. And see, I view that as very, very healthy.
Yeah.
Like,
oh yeah.
A lot of people don't like it. Like, I genuinely think it's a positive sign that balance is like, okay, yeah, balance is back, or it's starting to come back. So we'll keep hearing this, the housing bubble is going to crack. It's not a housing bubble. I'm sorry. Like, there's no inventory. Like 2008 and now don't look anything the same. They both, I think, suck. They're both rough, hard to deal with, but they're not the same thing.
Yeah. That's a good point. It's apples and oranges. And just because they're different doesn't mean that they're not both tough, but they're tough for different reasons. And I think, you're absolutely right. Having some really in-depth conversations with clients, it's going to lead to better outcomes, instead of just people, making decisions on a whim, or making them just because they're afraid of competition, in terms of there's going to be too many offers. So I'm going to waive this, I'm going to waive that. No, let's talk through it. Let's think about how this affects your actual cash flow. And we're entering the spring season. It's about to get a little even crazier, I'm sure.
Inventory is starting to fly up already, and I'll tell you what, if I was going to sell, I would sell while it was cold and miserable, because there's like virtually no competition.
Right.
But as soon as it gets nice out, people are like, oh my God, but they can see pictures of my flowers. Mm-hmm. They just go off on it. And everyone's just, I pray for all the brokers out there right now, just trying not to go under with everything going on. And I'm assuming, like, if somebody does, like, like, you consult on that stuff as well, right? Like, do you work pretty closely with, like, real estate brokers? Like, if you got a client that's looking to make an investment, are you guys pretty well tied into one another on those things? Yeah.
And that's how I try to frame how I can add value to my clients' financial lives. Of course, the financial planning and the investing, that's the bread and butter of what I do. But I also try to act as their financial quarterback. If they need a CPA, I'll send them some CPA names. If they need a real estate professional, I'm going to connect them, because they can, again, jump on the internet and do some Googling, but that's so impersonal. And, reading reviews online versus actually getting to know somebody is a totally different thing. So that's where I try to, frame it so that I'm going to save them time, not just from an investing standpoint, but from all these other different things that need to get done. Connecting with people like you, I think, is a huge value add for all the clients that I work with.
Sure. That's awesome. That's awesome. So kind of last thing I wanted to talk about, and then, kind of let you have free reign for a few minutes on the chat, is I just got a question on a different platform about, I'm sorry, I got a question I got to ask it about buying meme stocks.
Yeah.
And is it okay if it's just for fun, and I'm not hedging a lot of money against it, but something like AMC, Nintendo, GameStop, etc.
So, again, disclaimer, I don't have any thoughts or recommendations on any of these stocks in particular, but let's talk about the meme stock, phenomenon from
Wall Street bets, right?
Yeah, exactly. The Wall Street's bet phenomenon. And I think this is, as technology has just embedded itself into the world of finance, the different apps, the easier ways to buy stocks, there is a whole new generation of investors. We've been talking about millennials. Well, Gen Z kind of led the charge on a lot of these meme stocks. And, to get a little philosophical for a moment, having new investors, new blood, new life into the world of the stock market, that's a good thing. And that's what's going to keep the market going for the next few generations. But to get down very granular to a personal finance perspective, for all of the clients that I work with, we check the boxes in terms of their retirement, like I said, their savings, all of that. If there's money left over and if they have the desire to do some personal investing, I always recommend having a play account, because that in some respects it'll get it out of your system. And what I call the water cooler conversations, you're having a 30-second conversation with a coworker. They're like, hey, I just hit it big on XYZ stock. Again, if you've just got that need to participate in that, having a couple bucks in it, that's the best way to do it. But no, I do not ever recommend concentrating, putting a huge portion of your portfolio into that. I don't like to use the word gambling and investing, but it can become very close to that when you start investing into some of these very, very speculative stocks.
So how do we wind down on time here? So how do we survive this, right? Like the market's crappy. That's kind of the point, I guess, of the conversation for the people in my audience is the stress of just how do I get through this? We're seeing people's budgets tighten up, getting uncomfortable. They're nervous about both of our markets. I think in general, so how do we get through this? What do we do?
Well, what I recommend for anyone, if you're working with a financial advisor or if you're not working with a financial advisor, is write it down. And I keep it very general. This could be, let's bust out a spreadsheet and try to map out, I'm saving this much. It's going to be this much in the future. You can get very technical like that, or just write it down on a piece of paper of like what you've got, where you're headed. Try to give yourself that peace of mind that there is some sort of plan in place. If there isn't, at least map it out a little bit. But to talk very, very specifically, just to take it maybe to that one level higher, if you've got a plan, if you've got a portfolio, I'm talking about, an invested portfolio right now, there are things you can do during a down market. The obvious one, if you've got cash on the sidelines that you can invest, maybe think about putting some of that into the market. Specifically where, let's connect offline. I can talk about that. But there are, and I'm going to throw out some strategies here that we can always dig into future, but maybe now is the time to look at doing some tax loss harvesting. Tax loss harvesting is just selling in your taxable portfolio to capture some losses on the books. I call this the thinnest of silver lines during a stock market correction. But if you can capture some losses, offset some gains, and then get that money reinvested in the right way, there's a very specific way to do this so you don't trip over any tax problems. But that's one idea, and that's something we do for our clients. It can be easier said than done. And the other thing I want to throw out there is a Roth conversion. So I'm using some jargon, I'm using some lingo right now just to hopefully give the people watching some food for thought. But maybe now's a good time to take some money out of your traditional IRA or your pre-tax 401k, put that into a Roth. There's, I'd say some very strategic ways to do that are going to help you out in the future. This is the unsexiest advice you're going to get, but it definitely, if you could talk to your 60, 70-year-old self, they'd be thanking your present day self for sure.
So I'm a huge fan of my Roth IRA.
Yeah.
So why from your pre-tax to your Roth IRA?
Well, when the market is down, and this is, again, getting into the weeds a little bit, you can take the actual shares and do a conversion, what's called a share conversion from your traditional IRA to your Roth IRA. So if you got money, you're not, even though markets are down, you're going to be able to transfer over the same amount of shares. So this is not a cash conversion, it's a share conversion. And you can do a bigger conversion of shares when we're going through a stock market downturn. Now, this is a whole other tax disclaimer. It depends on your tax situation, depends on your tax bracket. Maybe it's not a bad idea or not a good idea, but this is one of the things that we talk with my clients when it comes to stock market downturns. There's always something, obviously market's up, that's great. When the market's down, let's make the best of it.
Consult a financial planner.
Exactly.
That's my headline. All right, so we're coming on our 45 minutes. So Alan, how can we get a hold of you, buddy?
Yeah, so I put my website up there, alan-hensley.com. It's got a link to my calendar, all of my different social media links. You can find me on Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, LinkedIn, wherever you want. And, if you're local, if you're here in the Tahali, Bonnie Lake, Seattle area, I'm happy to, let's find a time to grab some coffee, talk about whatever it is you want to talk about, or I can connect on Zoom. And, that comment I said earlier about going down a rabbit hole and asking a question on Google, shoot me an email. Let's connect. I'm happy to be a resource. If you're not a client, I can at least point you in the right direction. That's always my goal. And, hopefully it comes across. I love this stuff and I'll geek out about it as much as I can and help you out.
Well, if you're wondering, like, oh, I'm a little intimidated, right, by financial planner, all that, Alan wrote a book for like 4-year-olds on how to invest. So if you can communicate it to a 4-year-old, he can probably let you know what to do. So as always, I appreciate you guys jumping on here, checking it out. Replays will be on YouTube, Facebook, everything else, so you can kind of watch it in your own time. We'll definitely have Alan back for sure. Obviously, if you guys, need a real estate agent, either here in the greater Seattle, Tacoma area, or in the country, just drop me an email at therealaustinrobertson@gmail.com, and we'll see you guys next time.
All right. Thanks.